Everybody. Welcome. My name is Chris Yonker, and for those of you who are joining live, awesome that you can be here. For those of you who are watching this on a recording, hey, sorry we missed you, but I know that you're going to benefit from what is being said here. And I was saying, and I'm going to let these. We're all going to introduce ourselves here in a second, but I was really thinking about this topic of succession. And just really like the weight of it. And you realize that we've been, Fred and Jeff and myself, we've been in this world for a bit of time. But though, if you look at really the aspect of it, though, you step out of it, like it's a pretty big deal. Not only like you're looking to sell your business, but like the thing that potentially you've committed your life to professionally for so long over a period of time, like you're looking to actually change that, make that look differently. And then on top of it, potentially, this could be for many people, maybe most, Jeff could tell us, the largest financial transaction that they ever have in their lives. So it's a pretty big deal. And I can and with that being said, there's some psychology also I'll talk about with all that. Like and it's totally healthy to have some fear and some uncomfortability around this whole topic of these things that are on the table. And what I really when I think the challenges, I'm going to talk about 3 challenges, and then we'll get into introductions, because one of the challenges is tied to the introductions here. It's a solution to one of the challenges. So one of the challenges is that, like, okay, why is this not easier? And one of the reasons this is not easier is because we have our own biases and paradigms in relationship to what this all means. Exiting, succession, transition, however you want to define it. But there's some level of maybe you've had an experience, maybe you've tried, maybe you've talked to someone who's done it, they did it a certain way. I mean, we can go down the road, but there's a lot of, it's like when I was getting married, and then when we eventually decided to add to our family. I mean, boy, I tell you, when we decided to add to our family, like everyone had an opinion on parenting and how that was going to affect our lives, right? And in the business world, you start talking about exit or succession. I kind of feel there's a bit of that, right? And it's you can find plenty of opinion out there. So one is our biases and our paradigms, but the second one really has to do is okay, the second challenge is lack of qualified help. Finding folks who are qualified to truly help in a holistic way is another major challenge. And the third one we'll talk about today also is time. Most people, after 95% of folks who get involved with some type of transition or succession, typically takes long. It's like an addition to your house. Typically takes longer than you might think it's gonna. So with that all being said, let's get into who each of us are. I'll go real quick first. Again, my name is Chris Yonker. I have over 25 years of working at corporate America, and my last position, I was leading a team responsible for over $100 million worth of consumer product business across the country, and working on strategy and execution. I've also got 10 years of experience doing executive leadership coaching and things around mindset tied to an organization and executive team. And then also I've got a background in organizational health. So that's a little bit about me in relationship to the world that I serve. Jeff, could you give everyone here a little bit of context in who you are, and maybe even a little bit how you ended up in the space too around exit planning?
Sure. Yeah. Let me see if I can do this as quickly as possible to save some time. So thank you all for joining. And so I do strategic business, exit, estate, and investment planning, and have been doing so for 31 years. Own a firm called Photiades Wealth Management, and it's something that we really, really enjoy. Predominantly, we work with the owners of privately held companies and spend a fair amount of time weaving the personal world with the business world, which happens naturally. But we're pretty adept at making sure that neither piece gets forgotten. I have a team of 7, and the mission of our practice is to manage the process that allows you to discover peace of mind. And that's not an accidental mission. We are very clear of our role. We work routinely with folks like Fred and Chris as a part of managing that entire process. And I think today I might be able to share instances where an attorney or someone like Chris comes in because we recognize a need before the client does. I got into this space. I'm 55 years old next week. I joined when I was 23. My mother answered the ad. It's not like there's this beautiful, I went to Harvard Business School and all that. And for the first half of my career, it was really helping to pay my mortgage and all that stuff like any young individual. What was really unique about the privately owned business market is the openness on the part of the owners. I was open to everything as I developed, almost like out of necessity. It was like the mother of invention. Like if I don't remain open and listen to how others have done it, I'll just never learn. And I found that same thing in owners of companies. And so I just became more and more intrigued, and then accidentally began to do exit planning via out of a request from a client of mine going back to the late 90s. And I ended up doing more and more of it. So I'll stop there. Again, thank you for having me, Chris.
Yeah, thanks for being here. It's been a pleasure working with you, and on many fronts. Fred, tell us a little bit about yourself. Fred Forman.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you, Chris, and welcome everyone. And thank you for being here as well. And Jeff, happy birthday next week. Congratulations. That's wonderful. I hope you do something wonderful.
Tuesday, by the way, I happen to know that. So just.
Oh, so do we want to leave an email address if people want to send cards and gifts? Should we do that? So embarrassed. It's nice to see Jeff turn red during this discussion. I love it. So I'm Fred. I grew up in the Boston area, and I'm thrilled that I've been doing this for going on my 33rd year now of business and estate planning. And I think the two are related, because when you deal with a business owner that's transitioning out of the business, you're also talking about how they plan to transition their wealth, what they're going to do with the rest of their lives. So I kept them on both fronts. I've also been fortunate enough that during law school, I worked in a family business. So I've actually had the experience of, like they have, of being on the ground in a business and also now advising businesses from both sides of the fence, which is a really, really valuable thing. What I love about this and what I'm passionate about this kind of a discussion about is that it's holistic. And I love that, because as an attorney, especially in the estate planning side of things, I often get clients who come in and see me and say, I sold a business last year. Now I have to transition my wealth. And I look at the transaction, I say, oh my God, you could have saved all this money in taxes. Why didn't somebody advise you on an investment strategy? What do you mean now you don't know what you want to do with the rest of your life? Why didn't you have Chris involved who could talk to you about what the big picture is? Or what do you mean you have regrets that you sold to certain family members and that may have been a mistake? If Chris had been involved in counseling you from a personal standpoint early on, if Jeff had been advising you on investment strategies and insurance strategies, if we had gotten your accountant involved in the discussion, in addition to saving taxes, more important than money, we could have made your life that much more enriched. And that just is a sad thing to see. So I'm thrilled, excited, and encouraged when I see this. We have offices in New Hampshire, Maine, and Massachusetts, but I practice with clients all over the country, from smaller family-owned businesses to super very large businesses as well. And I treat them all the same because they all have the unique challenges. Whether it's a super large company or a super small company, everybody's fears, goals, desires, and hopes are all the same. So we treat everyone differently. No cookie cutter approaches, no one size fits all. And that's what makes it fun for me. I don't want to repeat the same things over and over again. I want to work with people who really get it and want to do the right thing. And that's why I love working with Chris and Jeff, because I know they do as well. When you work with like-minded people, it's invigorating. So thank you, Chris, for having us.
Yeah, thank you very much, Fred. Yeah, I think it's important to say, as folks are listening, we all do work nationally. So even though we happen to all be in New England, that just FYI, all of us have clients all over the United States.
And we prefer our southern clients in the winter and our northern clients in the summer, but that's another story.
Of course we do. Yes. And we are looking for clients in Hawaii, if anyone is. Okay. All right. So let's talk about the upside of doing this work. Is folks that are sitting out there, and this is for anybody who has a business that someday knows that you will not be running it and owning it. So let's qualify that from the gate, right? So which pretty much can be anybody. One of the common things in the folks that we work with is they are looking to protect something that they would label as a core value, right? So this is what Jeff and Fred and myself, like what allows us to work together so well, is each of us get very clear in identifying what are the core values of this person I'm working with, and what are they trying to protect in relationship to that? So that as we look at where we're at now and where they want to be, which is the other piece, what's their vision of where they want to go and what they're trying to create. All of us, and Jeff will talk about this, but each one of us, if you started with it, we are going to get very clear into your vision process. Now, my vision process might be a little bit different that I'd walk you through, but it's the same idea, right? What are you trying to accomplish? And what ends up happening is, if you say, what things do you typically want to protect? Well, often they want to protect their family's future. They want to protect maybe the integrity of their family, depending on how the family business looks, and if it is a family business. They want to protect their key employees, the key personnel that help them get to where they want to go. Somehow they want to protect that. They want to protect their employees, and potentially they want to protect the legacy of that business, right? And so each of these pieces, typically, and usually it's all of those, we look at how to do that. The challenge we get into with that can be is that we have fear and how it can go wrong, or you see how it can't work. And without even really working with someone who can help us see. And then what ends up happening psychologically is that we spend a lot of time and energy and effort avoiding what we don't want to happen, right? And typically you can't get to where you want to go while trying to avoid being somewhere else. Hey, I don't want to be here, but potentially I want to be here. You with me? And all my energy is going into my fear of what I don't want to happen. So what I'd like to do is, and we'll start with Jeff here, and then Fred can go, is when do I start thinking about this topic? Is one of the questions, right? Well, when? And and the reason I bring this up, as I was talking to someone who had decided about 4 months ago that they wanted to do a transition in the next year. And then now they're 3 to 4 years out. Because of things that's transferred and happened in they're in the food and beverage world, and just because of some things that's happened with the Delta variant and some other things that are into their business. But the fact of the matter is, they're still inside 5 years, right? And we often we get into this head game of, well, where am I at, and when do I need to start thinking about this? Or there's some people we talk to like 10 years, is that too long? So Jeff, you can tell us, like, when should I start thinking about this, and what could be going on that I want to be paying attention to, that that would be a place that typically someone would start conversing with someone like yourself?
Yeah, it's a really good question. And, here's my experience of life. Like, we all want to do what the others do. Right. So, and even think about the answer to this, like, well, what does everybody else do? I want to be like everybody else. And here's my opinion. The day you buy the business is the day you start thinking about it. You actually begin, if you buy that business and don't know, like, how I'm going to exit, there's nothing wrong with that. But it would be extraordinarily helpful to understand what the plan is that I have around owning this business. Now, we don't always have the luxury. Sometimes it's like, well, I never meant to own a business. It just kind of happened. Something happened to a parent and it just landed in my lap. Or I started playing around on the internet like some of our clients' children are doing, and they're selling wares or something, and then it just occurs. So my like global answer is the day you buy it. But let's think about anybody who's thinking, okay, but I've owned it. I didn't think of it that way. Think more instructively. When should I start this process? My opinion, 7 to 10 years in advance is really, really healthy. And the reason is there's time to think. There's time to discover, analyze, talk to your CPA, talk to banks, look internally, do all of the design, determine what the value is, determine what I need to get out of the business, what the experience. You just have a lot of time, and you can move mountains in 7 to 10 years. When we get down into 3 to 5 years, I think that's also really, really good. If someone's never gone down the path, it will feel kind of accelerated. And you might think 3 to 5 years, there's nothing accelerated about 3 to 5 years. I've been married for 33 years. 3 to 5 years to me is like, that. I still can't believe we've got children 28 and 25. Things move quickly. So 3 to 5 years is kind of warp speed. And then 3 months to a year, that becomes a little bit more difficult. Not that it can't be done. It requires a higher level of engagement from all parties. In every instance, you want some point person. We could use the term quarterback, but I'm going to say some point person to manage that process, whomever it is. And sometimes it's a me, sometimes it's an accountant, sometimes it's another advisor, sometimes it's an attorney. But just have someone on point that won't forget. So we've done some in that shorter time period. It's just everybody's got to be on the ready. It is an every 2-week study, analyze, respond, make decisions. And those are most often not as much fun and most often under more of a duress type situation, a health situation or something like that.
From a legal standpoint, I'll echo, in addition to echoing everything Jeff said, Jeff, that wasn't copywritten or trademarked, I hope, because I echo all of the sentiments. See how the lawyer thinks. Yeah, there's a lawyer who saw a car accident. He said, I saw the whole thing. I can take either side. That's lawyers. So that's what we're dealing with here, folks. But from a legal standpoint, I agree. If you can think about it earlier is always better because it allows us to do a lot of good planning. Again, working with your team. When do I want out? A related question is, why do I want out? I have clients in their late 80s who are energized about their business and would be miserable if they retired. What would they do the rest of their life? I have others who are in their early 50s and are just miserable and are ready to get out. So when and why often are related, and that's where where Chris would come in to look at the why. What am I going to do with the rest of my life if I do this? From a legal standpoint, I like early as well because it allows us to do things like really sit down with your team. And again, I love the team. I love the quarterback approach where you have somebody like a Chris or a Jeff who's quarterbacking. I'm special teams. I'm brought in for legal documents, structuring the deal from a picture. We'll look at things like buyer. Is it a family member? Sometimes I know your kids, and I don't think it's good to put them in business again. I had this yesterday. The client and the son and daughter were never going to be able to work together. What if I have the business as my major asset, as Chris said at the beginning of the business, but yet treat them fairly? Do I have multiple classes of stock? Do I have voting and non-voting so that my children could all get an equal share, but they're not going to fight about who runs the company? Do I want to sell to my employees? There can be some great tax advantages to that. And if we know early enough, there are cool things we can do, like Jeff can set up profit sharing plans that can be made into ESOPs, which allows you to sell your business and pay no capital gains tax, saving potentially millions of dollars. But we have to know that early. Or is it better to sell to an outside third party who has no relationship with me now, but a broker finds and gets me? And Chris and Jeff can help me find a broker for that. And the longer you can shop, the better potential buyers you have. So early is better. Or do I bring in somebody and mentor them to take over my position? That's kind of organic growth. Do I look at family members, employees, third parties, grow it organically and bring people in to mentor them? If I have early planning, I can talk about whether it should be a stock sale or an asset sale. A stock sale generally means for the seller, less taxes. Everything's capital gains. The buyer, though, doesn't often like to take on the liability, so maybe there's some negotiation over price. But that tells me that we need to work with the accountant, because which direction we go in tells us how we want to position the balance sheet. A lot of clients try to look poor on paper for tax reasons. But when you're getting into the business sale mode, now is the time to look better on paper. When you're trying to position that balance sheet for sale, you can sort of be, foolish if you try to play too many games on the tax side and you hurt yourself on the business sales side. So the early we have to plan, we can minimize those things, look at the right buyers, look at how to position a balance sheet, look at how to minimize taxes, whether it's stock or asset sale, and minimize our liability. Because if we can do it early and we can get a buyer engaged early, we can get them maybe interested in being involved in the business. Then we can do more as-is clauses in the purchase and sale agreement because they have familiarity with the business. They're not relying on my representations. It's sort of like if you lived in the house and then sold it to your tenant, you don't have to promise them as much about the condition of the property. They've been there. So I have a lot of little neat strategies legally if the person's been engaged in the business for a while. So I'll echo the sentiments of both Chris and Jeff, and that would be early is better. Late is crisis planning, and that's often not as good. But going back to where Chris would come in, it's not just when do I want out, it's why do I want out? Because I got to think about the rest of my life. And that may be a good segue back to you, Chris.
Yeah, great point. And I think oftentimes we forget. I mean, COVID, what COVID's done for a lot of folks is to pause and check in on core values and to assure themselves that we're living in regards to what that means, right? And like, okay, and it depends on, the age of the person and whatnot, but typically what ends up happening is if someone gets to midlife, whether it's the 40s or 50s or 60s, and then at that point you start realizing like, okay, like the back half has got kind of equal distance to the front half, and it kind of creates this thing called leverage in relationship to how we might look at our circumstance. And a situation like COVID, what it did do for us is it helped us remember that we're all going to die, if that's okay to say. It's just a reminder, like, hey, you know what? Life is short, and also it's unpredictable. And I think oftentimes when we look at a topic like this, we're like, oh yeah, a couple of years, this and that, or it's so easy to push out a little bit. It's like when I was going to leave corporate America and I was at 3M, and I'm like, well, I can always do that another time. So it was just so easy to push it off. So easy, even though I had my own consulting and business I had started, it seems uncomfortable. Some part of it doesn't feel comfortable to me. So we come up with and for those, psychologically, I'd ask yourself is if you haven't started the process of thinking this through, or if you're here, you're thinking about it, okay? Because otherwise you wouldn't be here watching a recording or attending if you weren't thinking about the topic. But let's just say, there's probably, there's probably a story somewhere in there about why it's better to wait or how it's going to be your look. And you heard Fred went quick through a lot of illustrations of ways things can go. And your goal right now today is not to get that piece yet. Understand that someone like Fred, you sit with a Fred, he's going to be able to help you navigate that and see where you can turn left here, you can turn right here. And I'll tell you the benefit of either one of those. But most importantly, what do you want? And I think the challenge is for those of you here and listening is we try to figure out how too soon and without enough information to figure out how, when quite frankly, in many cases, we're not qualified to figure out how. It's not necessarily our job. We can build in a team. That's what you were talking about today. We can build a team around us to help us figure out how. And so we'll talk a little bit about that, but understand the context of time. Things are always going to change. And also, it's never going to be what you define in your mind as the perfect time. And I think when we look at this topic called succession, whether you're $5 million company, a $250 million company, the idea of this topic, and for what happens for me at time to time is that people look at it this is like, well, it's a separate work stream. It's a separate work stream, and it's another project I'll do another time. And I've got all this. After I do this, I'll do it. After I do this, I'll do it. It's like, it's like having kids. After this, we'll do it. Right? It's okay. Well, those are stories and those are illustrations. And quite frankly, let me put this out there. And Jeff, for Fred, you can tell me if I'm off here, but is there ever a time when someone's going to do an exit, a succession, a transition that they did not want the business better at the time that they did it, as opposed to where it might be today? Healthier leadership, healthier organizational health, healthier, maybe just the position of the company in the market better, right? Whether it's necessary to grow it or not, is it not fair to say that if we're looking 3 to 5 years out plus, wouldn't it make sense to start working on it now so that we can work on these things to improve the later? Would that be helpful?
Yeah. Well, let me say this. This is a really interesting question or comment. There is a distinction between the first thought of selling it and what happens in the process. So the first thought of selling it often is, I want the most amount of money. Of course, why would I not? But I will tell you, in the process, I've never experienced it otherwise. Almost always, I don't want to make too many absolutes, the business sells to the ideal buyer, not to the highest bidder. And it's because there is a transition, an internal thing that goes on from I want all of the money out of it to this is no different than one of my children. I've spent more time with this probably than all of my children combined. I care about what happens on the other side. I do care about what it becomes. I care about who's at the helm. I care about the customers, the clients, it's the weirdest thing. And the first time I went through it, it didn't make sense to me at all. I'm like, could you, why is that so important? Oh no, it's important. And oftentimes they're discounted sales. And anyone on this phone, don't be like, oh my God, let's click off now, like a discounted sale. The care is more about the process and the end result than it is about the money, which makes what my role and my purview is to remove the mystery around a lot of that.
And from my perspective, in addition to it's my baby, I want it to continue. I care about my customers. I care about my clients. Maybe I want to build a name legacy where I know I've left something behind. But in addition to that, from my standpoint on the legal side, one of the things we wrestle with on the best price is, do I take a bird in the hand? Do I take less money up front or do I take more money over time? And this is where Chris gets into what's your lifestyle? What are you going to do with the rest of your life? And you get Jeff into what's your budget going to be and what other investments and assets do you have? Can you live off of a promissory note? From my legal standpoint, I say, well, of course, when there's a promissory note, there's always a risk. How do I mitigate that risk? Personal guarantees, a lien on the person buying its house if they have assets. Maybe the ability to step back into the business if you don't like the decisions being made and you want to protect the integrity of the business that's paying you, but that means potentially getting back involved. Would you rather have a clean deal with less money, or would you rather have a more complicated deal where you get more money if they pay you, but you're taking a risk of getting paid over time? This is where Chris might get into your philosophy of life, who you are as a person, whether you can live with that risk. Do you want to be in Florida playing golf and not worrying, or are you willing to take on a little risk for extra money? Are you a gambler? And Jeff will look at things like your budget, what you can afford, what would happen if the person did default, did need an extension on the loan, versus what if you took all the money up front? How would we invest or what would we do with it? So again, the holistic approach is really coming to fruition here because you have to look at what's the person like, What do they care about? Do they care about it being my baby? Do they care about their clients leaving a legacy? They just care about money. If they just care about money, is it sometimes better to take a little more up, a little less upfront and a little more over time? These are very interesting topics, and this is why no one size fits all.
Yeah, absolutely. And is, you know, there's what ends up happening, I think, in family businesses, and we'll get into this a little bit, the time we have, is that we look at the family and then we say, well, I want to keep it in the family, right? I want to keep it in the family. I did a podcast interview with a gentleman who's the he's a winemaker. He's a 6th generation vineyard owner, and his son will be 7, right? So that's pretty longevity. And I'm asking him, I'm like, does your son want to be 7? Like he's like, I'm not really sure. Like he's doing it, but like he's still in his 20s, and like I'm not sure if this is his jam or not. And I can think of that 20-something person going like, do I want to break the chain? Right? Do I want to be the guy? We get the longest lineage in U.S. history. Maybe in France it's not a big deal, but if you're here, and it's, think about the psychology on both sides, right? The psychology of the son, the psychology, and I've seen that happen with, Jeffrey, actually, with a client we both worked with a daughter who was involved in a business, and they had two brothers and their dad, and then their things were kind of stuck because of just the communication wasn't really open in the family. Can you believe a family had some dysfunction in it?
I've never heard of such a thing. It's crazy. But no, what you say, Chris, makes sense. I worked with a client not too long ago. They were transitioning the business to 3 children. This is a very successful business out of state that did automobile sales, service, and parts. And one child was very active in the sales and the dealership end. One child was very active in parts, and one was loved the mechanical aspect of the business and the repair work. And there was no way to put them in business together. We tried, we even talked about family counselors. There's no way it's going to work. And then there were spousal influences with the kids and how that would interact. So working again with their accounting firm, and their financial people, and working with their coach who looked at their family dynamic, we put together a cool thing. There's a cool code section called 455. I'm a kind of a IRS tax code nerd, but there's a cool section where you can spin off aspects of the business tax-free. So we spun the company into 3, a car dealership, a parts, and a repair shop, and they all had contracts with each other, agreeing to be exclusive to each other, but yet each kid ran their own fiefdom, and we're going into year 4 now, and it's working. So cool stuff. Yeah.
So Jeff, can you share a story or two in regards to when someone gets involved and is able to plan in advance and how things can go, and when potentially something's goes awry, that someone can listen to, and we all like stories, and you can learn from these illustrations. And I know even with your work, there's a lot of healing can happen too inside the family. And it's not like people aren't signing up for that, but it's the end result of working with us. So if you're going to share any, I'm not saying that you have to share that, but whatever's on your mind, I think be worthwhile.
Yeah, so good question. And why don't I think maybe a story or two that are unique to one another that worked, and maybe I think what I'd like to do is one that didn't work very well, didn't go well, and why I think so. How about if I go down that route? So I'll tell you, you remember things like how many black t-shirts does someone buy per season? It was May of 2012, and I meet with the owner. It's a commercial construction company in Massachusetts. And I got to the end of my first meeting, and I said, here's how we work. And I said, we like to meet each year, 5, 6, 8 times per year. It allows us to build a relationship. And he said, 8? He said, I don't want to see you once a year. And like his reaction to me as an advisor was, and I meet with him tomorrow to do a review. And every other time I probably joke about this. Remember, you told me you didn't want to see me. And very quickly, he said, here's our thing. Myself and my brother are, we're second, third generation in this business. At that time, the business was around for about 100 years or close to 100 years. And he said, it's getting to be that time. And we figure we're maybe 4, 5, 6, 7 years away. So the timing was really good. And we spent, I would say, about 2 years in design. So strategically, I ran point on all this and brought in the CPA, brought in the attorney, and they're brought in at specific points in time. When I'm quarterbacking it, they're brought in at specific points in time. All of a sudden, the entire thing goes quiet. Everything stalls. And what we learn is one of the children who had gotten divorced, I think like 8 or 10 years prior, almost was never the same. And so there were different streams, kind of what you were talking about, Fred. There was someone who's in the office, someone who's operations, and someone who's on equipment. But the person who would have taken over the operations side of the business was really struggling. They're like, he's just never been the same. In this case, I called Chris and I talked to the client and I said, and we're going to call this family conflict. And I'm going to call what Chris did was family conflict resolution. We went into about 1.5 years or 2 years where the entire thing stalled. And this is probably not a normal word to use when we're talking about all this business plan and all this stuff, but healing needed to occur. Healing really needed to occur for that individual, but also for the two brothers. You know, one of them was his dad, such that they could begin to feel good. And once we moved through that, we picked things back up. It took about 2 more years of going back and forth, going through the agreements, all this stuff, and it was signed. I still have this note, and part of me is in disbelief that I have it, but I got a note from the owner. This was this gentleman's dad, and he said, "Thank you for all of the work that you've done. Thank you for listening, and thank you for giving us our son back."
Wow.
That was, I'll call that a real success. And there's emotion in there, and we are all in play right now. The business continuation plan that pays out to the 2 dads, the kids who are taking over. I mean, it's beautiful. And it started in May of 2012. Here we are in 2021. Another one that was really, really cool is a local construction company. Fascinating, an existing client of mine. We went through our discovery, did value gap analysis, fair market value. All options were explored. And he came to me and he said, I want an MBO, which is a management buyout, internal, and don't even talk to me about ESOP. I've heard of them. I hate them. They sound terrible, blah, blah, blah. So design, again, firm up the valuation. And then we were all set to go. June, I was on vacation, I remember, and he says, I've got him and the valuation guy on the phone. He says, don't get mad at me, Jeff. I want to talk about an ESOP. So short-circuited, we spent 6 months. We're talking ESOPs, like you dive deep, and they're not inexpensive. We get to December of that year. He said, I don't want to do an ESOP. Let's go back to a management buyout. We spend another year, and they completed a 25% sale internally with great success. And right now, they're looking back at an ESOP again and looking to move another 25% owner. So it looks like it'll end up being a 50% ESOP, and 50% or 51% is going to be owned by this key person. This is the dynamics. Very, very successful. Unsuccessful, wrong quarterback, no process, lack of emotional readiness. And this one is, it might be the same case that you're talking about, Chris. In fact, I would say it is. Discovery, we had conflict right out of the gate. We dove into that pretty quickly. upon coming out of the conflict, all of a sudden everybody is talking. It was going really, really well. And I learned a lot. One fateful error on my part. We've got it from here, and this is the attorney and the accountant. We've got it from here. We should be able to sign this on Friday. On Friday, there was miscommunication in the contract, and one of the children flipped out, got his own attorney. The other daughter flipped out. She wanted to get out of the business. 5 more years of legal fees. The family doesn't speak. Dad died a year ago. Like, I learned a lot. One of the things I learned personally is you never, if you're quarterbacking it, you never ever pull yourself out. Don't take anything for granted. The other is they're slippery. Family business transition, they're just weird. They're slippery, and they're more slippery within families. There's so much emotion that comes with it. Little couple that worked really, really well, and then an example where, boy, it's no one's happy with the outcome. And mom, who's still alive in her 80s, is like, that was my deepest worry, was that my children would not want to, and no joke, they don't want to spend Thanksgiving together.
Well, I've been on both of those ends as well. And just for the group, because we love this stuff so much, we sometimes use words like ESOP, but just not getting into the weeds. An ESOP is a way you can actually sell your company to your employees. And as long as you take the money from the sale and reinvest it in US-based securities, mutual fund stocks, which Jeff helps you do within 15 months of the sale, you pay no capital gains tax on the sale. You sold your business free of charge. The ESOP borrows money from a bank to buy you out. The company makes contributions to the ESOP each year. Contributions to an ESOP are tax deductible, so the company's actually deducting your buyout, which is the only way in history you can do that. Your buyout's being financed through a bank. It's tax deductible. You don't pay tax on the sale of your business, and now you've got stock. You can live off the dividends at a low income rate. You can sell stock as you go to live on. If you die, or at least today, your kids get a free step up in basis and can sell that stock without capital gain. I had a case, a very successful one, where they said they wanted to sell to their employees. So we took their profit sharing plan, converted to an ESOP, saved $3.8 million in capital gains taxes, and then now living off the dividends on the stocks that they invested with. Conversely, to give you the flip side, I had a client who came in and were doing their estate plan, and they said, we're really concerned. We have a very large estate. We're going to have a lot of estate taxes. And we also want to leave a lot of money to charity. That'll mitigate the estate tax sum. I said, well, you just sold your business a few months ago. Did anybody talk to you about a charitable trust? No, what does that mean, Fred? Well, had we put your business or some of your business stock into a charitable trust, you could have sold it through the charitable trust. In their case, they would have saved $10 million in capital gains taxes. If that earned 5%, that would have given them an extra $500,000 a year because they wouldn't have paid capital gains tax. They would have had an extra $500 a year for the rest of their lives. They could have used some of that $500,000 to buy some insurance, so their kids got the money from this. They got the same money they would have gotten had they sold the business, so nobody loses out, and they would have benefited charities that they care about, and got to see the joy of making that gift while they were living, and they lost out on that, and that was really a shame. In a similar situation, I had a client who said I motivated one of my employees by giving them stock, and they left. And now I'm getting letters from their attorneys saying, where are my profits this year? And if you sell the business, we want to be consulted. I said, well, why didn't you offer them incentive or phantom stock where it's just like stock? You give them skin in the game. They get excited because they're getting a piece of the profits. But if they leave, all bets are off, and you don't have to end up living with them, but yet you're motivating them to buy you out. And you can give them phantom stock with a one-way buy-sell agreement where they have to buy you out when you're ready to retire. So you get a buyer, you get them skin in the game. But if they leave, all bets are off. Nobody ever told me about that. And, it's just a shame when that goes back to a couple of things we've said today. It goes back to the planning early. It goes back to the holistic approach to planning, having advisors who understand not just the legal and tax, there are plenty of us geeks out there, but understand your personal goals on the Chris side and understand the finances on the Jeff side. And if you can plan early, all the better, because sometimes there may be some family counseling involved that can save a deal as well as blow up a deal. If the family counseling doesn't work out, the family counseling can often save a deal. So early, holistic, a team, always better. Be creative, no one size fits all, no cookie cutters. Jeff and I just gave a myriad of examples of things that worked and things that didn't work. Chris could give you a ton as well. Together, we could do a 3-day seminar just on, war stories, but it would all come down to one thing. Some worked, some didn't, and the difference was good planning and good team members.
Yeah, and I think it also it's helpful when the client that's involved is willing to grow through the process, at least from my vantage point. They're willing to grow personally from the process as through the process. Like, hey, if I can go through this process, I think part of what ends up happening was, and you get into some of the nightmare scenarios, like we adopted our daughter, and you want to get into nightmare scenarios. I made the mistake of interviewing like 3 people that went through the adoption process, and they were all nightmares, all of them. Some of them are like really like bad. Like one like had got a kid and then the kid was taken away, like this ridiculous stuff.
Wow.
And yeah, they worked it out, but like just you hear that stuff, right? And then you're like, what? And then you of course like, oh my God, does that have to be me? And the fact of the matter is that what ends up happening is when our ego and our desire for like self-interest jumps to the top, especially when we're dealing with like family members. And my goal in working with the family is like, if I can help each person get really clear on what they want individually, core values, what do you want? Core values, what do you want for your life? Core values, what do you want for your life? Let's get all this on this, and then let's look at the business and let's figure out how can we help each person take their own self-interest off the table for the time being, with the agreement, if we do what's better for the greater good over here, it can drive what's best for us. I mean, that's really what building a team is about in an organization. The challenge with teamwork, building teams in a company, is that we're human beings and we are operating out of protecting ourselves, keeping ourselves safe, and that all ties back to self-interest. Like it's like we're not wired naturally to do that, so we have to break that down. So a couple of things that I want to go to some Q&A here, because I see that's where we're at time, but I'm going to summarize some things that have been brought up today. One is that it's the timeline on driving anything is now. Okay, if you haven't heard that, it's now. Wherever you're at right now, this is, if you have not started working with somebody to give you some perspective, then this would be a good time to do that. Secondly, not all folks in this arena have been trained, qualified, and had the experience to help someone navigate from a holistic perspective. So just know that as you look to build, which we also talk about, you're going to need a team. Now, each of the team members, as Jeff had said, can come in at different points in time, but at some point you're going to need an attorney. At some point you're going to need a financial advisor. At some point you're going to need an accountant. And potentially at some point, you're going to need someone to help with organizational health or leadership or coaching or family counseling, all that we do here at the Center for Conscious Living. But any of those things, right? At some point, you may very well need those things. And you will need it's like a board of advisors, right? Who are all there to help you navigate this thing. And, and don't look at it as a transactional. My input on hiring someone is work with someone like Fred and his team, or Jeff and his team, who truly care about the person at the other side of the table, who aren't none of us here, the reason that all 3 of us get along so well is none of us are here for hourly fees and transactional work to build our businesses. Like, that's not what this is about. It's about creating deep, meaningful relationships with people and helping them build a more meaningful, fulfilled life through whatever this consequential transition is they're navigating. Okay, so that's the common element, and that, to me, that's something you're probably looking for. If you don't share core values with someone that's hiring you, there's probably going to be a little bit of opposition in regards to working with those people. So if you're out there and you have any questions, what I'm going to ask you to do, put it in this put in the text box, say I have a question, and then I'll unmute you and we'll go to you. In the meanwhile, while I'm waiting for folks to do that, I'm gonna fire off a question on is
And Chris, may I just say, if sometimes people in groups don't like to ask a personal question in group, I'm assuming that they can email you the questions offline as well, and we can farm them out to the three of us if need be.
everybody here is going. Yes, everyone here is going to get an email the end of this week with notes and highlights of the meeting, as well as the recording, and as well as everyone's contact information that's here, including Fred, including Jeff, including myself. So that definitely, absolutely, you're right, and that because this can be it's something that folks that may not want to bring up for self. But here's a question I want to put out to you. I'll start with Jeff on this one. Let's say I decide, like, okay, it's not apparent that, like, I have a friend that he's in a business, family business, and his brother and his dad, two of his brothers and his dad are running this about $100 million company, and there's not an apparent successor. Like, it's just really in the family. The kids that are, they're not the type of folks who are really trying to push their kids in the business, and they know at some point they're probably going to break this thing apart and sell it, or however, right? And with that being said, like, do I consider private equity? But then I heard all these nightmares around private equity, Jeff, and, am I better off to get a broker and just market this thing out, or like, what's your vantage point on that topic?
Yeah, I'll take the lawyer response. It depends. Right, Fred?
Exactly.
So here's where we begin every time. And so in discovery, it is, why are you bothering to have the conversation? And I know this sounds almost like harsh or coarse, but why do you actually want to do this? And then what is the experience you want? What is the end game that you want? And so core values and all that stuff, absolutely. What is the vision? Like, if you could write the script, what would it look like? And so that is a complete departure. And I can stay in business mode for sure, but my preference is to climb beneath it and determine what is it they ultimately want for the employees, for the customers, clients, and for yourself. And then we look at the different options. And, sometimes, I know it sounds weird, things shift. When you get very clear on what it is that you want, you may become more receptive to private equity. It may open up conversations with key people. So we look at internal and external sales. If we're going to go external, what direction would you go in? Who would you align with? And if something opens up internally, how would you navigate it? So like almost every time, it depends. This thing is like an amoeba that you try and grab, almost like grabbing a jellyfish. And as best as you think you've got it, it squeezes out like the last two fingers. And you're like, well, where the heck did it go now? And so in our world, we've got a lot of time. We've structured our practice such that we can be very patient. And we know that we're going to bump into that stuff from time to time. So does that help?
Yeah, definitely. And there's a lot of consolidation in a lot of worlds right now, right? Like in general in our world, that depending, and I mean like in a lot of industries, right? From automotive to manufacturing to medical, it's just happening.
Well, it's ridiculous, and I'm going to tell you that the 2M or the M2 money supply right now is greater than it has ever been. And this is why we should have ended the business sales cycle in around 2018. They run 10 years where it favors the seller. It should have ended 2018, 2019. Tax code kind of, it basically pushed that out a bit. And there is $4 trillion in money market and private equity. The multiples are higher than they've ever been. The M&A people are busier than they've ever been. It is over the top. It's a great time to sell a construction company, a grocery stores. It's just, it's out of control. That doesn't mean go like, oh my gosh, I wasn't going to, and now I'm going to, and money drives it. But if you're thinking about it, let me tell you, like, there's never been more money in this country, and they don't have any place to put it because there's no yields coming out of fixed income. So it's like, it's got to go somewhere. The private equity people are like, they're looking at deals all the time, like, because there's like, they've got the money. So little departure, but.
And if anyone has any questions, please raise your hand or type in. And meanwhile, I'm going to just wrap up here. I got about 2 minutes left. Okay, so one of the last things that might be in people's mind is like, okay, how do I know if I need to reach out? Well, if you got any questions on anything we've talked about, it's an invitation to reach out. Is that pretty fair to say? If you're thinking about your future, it's good to reach out. If you have and on my behalf, things I look for is like, is there some type of conflict or issues in your organization in regards to leadership or in the organizational health, or are you putting out fires in more than you probably should be as a business owner? One of the benefits of going through this process and working through succession is that your role gets changed, and you get to work on what you want on your own business and work more on your business and in your business over time and build the life that you want. If your business is conflicting with your family, we probably should talk, right? Because like if there's conflicts there that can happen. So any of these things are invitations to talk to any one of us. And as a reminder, you'll be getting an email, and the email will have all of our information. And as an invitation to connect with any one of us, you're not going to get dinged hourly to have a conversation. And if nothing else, at least you'll have a connection with that other party, even if we decide we never work together. So, Jeff, thank you for taking the time and being here. Fred, thank you for taking the time and being here. And that could join us live. Awesome. Thank you for being here. And we'll talk again. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you all. Bye-bye.
Take care.